evening, my name is Casper, and today we are going to be talking about Armored Warrior Iris, which is a visual novel developed by Black Lilith and released in English by Manga Gamer in 2014. I didn't style my hair. Look at that, it's so floofy. Look at this cowlick. Oh my god, like gravity just doesn't apply to this thing. Anyways, Armored Warrior Iris tells the story of course, Iris, who is a lieutenant in the Soviet security force with her best friend and partner, Mei Li. When they get shot down during their attempts at suppressing a political uprising on the planet Left, she is forced to wander in search for her comrade for 3 days before finally being kidnapped and sold to Bozook, a brothel owner that prides himself on providing variety to his clients. So, Iris takes it upon herself to track down Mei Li and take their asses home. After like a ton of sex though, like, oh my god. So, Armored Warrior Iris actually had surprisingly good writing. Sorry, I had to move the camera a bit. You guys know that I have a pretty terrible habit of pointing out every single tiny flaw I can possibly find in hentai games out of some bizarre sense of self-preservation, but the creators actually did a great job of presenting the story to the player. We start off the game by getting to know the two primary characters, Iris and Mei Li. They're working to take out a human trafficking network, so we get to see how they interact with the bad guys versus how they interact with each other once they're alone and once they're away from everyone inside their private quarters. While I can't say that I grew to care about these characters because this isn't exactly an emotional story, it did give us an understanding of what kind of friendship these two had, especially when Mei Li invites Iris to come watch a movie with her like Yojimbo. Because by the time Iris and Mei Li are shot down while trying to suppress the political uprising, we understand why Iris is willing to live as a prostitute within a brothel in order to find her captured comrade, as opposed to a lot of stories which just start out with saying, oh, I'm the main character and I want to save this person I care about, with like no backstory whatsoever. It also created for a very interesting dynamic with Riruru, who looks and sounds just like Mei Li in every single way, but is actually Bozook's favored vagina, and sort of acts as a caretaker for the other prostitutes. Both Bozook and Riruru insist multiple times throughout the game that the only relation she has is that she's an elf that happens to look just like Mei Li, but Iris has a very, very hard time throughout the game seeing her as anyone other than her best friend, which is what led to a fair amount of character development on both sides. On one hand, in the very beginning, Iris is dead set the only thing she cares about is finding Mei Li and escaping the brothel so she can return to the Federation, which is why in the beginning she spends a lot of time sneaking around the brothel to get a sort of feel for the establishment's security protocols. However, as time goes on, Iris begins to see Riruru as her own person, she becomes attached to her, and she sees her more as just the person that looks like her former comrade. And then she starts to find her priorities becoming a little skewed, and Riruru goes through similar development. She starts out very enigmatic, she's borderline sadistic, and just in general, she's a bitch. But the more time she spends with Iris, the more connected she feels with her, and she eventually, slowly becomes less of a shitty person. And then it's not long until they're doing it in the courtyard, of all places. The courtyard. The development aside, I do want to touch base on the variety of clients within the brothel. Not so much the species difference, which I'll cover more in the visual segment, but the personalities were all very different from one another. And that made the story a little more enjoyable for me. Of course, we have the asshole rapey types that just go to town and say, oh, shut up and suck my... I can't say mean things. But they're very mean about it. But then there are some characters that are a little shy, they're gentlemanly, or just understand that prostitutes have pain receptors. You get a total of 6 moments in the game where you get to choose from a client list of 3, and before you ask, yes, your choices do influence which of the 5 endings you will receive. So not only is it kind of exciting to see what kind of species of alien you're going to be getting the oogity boogity on, but it also makes it that much more interesting to wonder if they're going to be a, decent person about it, or if they're just going to treat you like trash. There's even a third surprise for the people who choose the third option on every list, which is the body modification option, where you are physically altered to pander to your client's fetishes because science. It's like those sticker machines at family restaurants where you put the quarter in and you turn the little crank and then you really hope that you don't get the like super ugly clown sticker. I do have 3 major problems though, and the first one is the otaku option. You had to bring us into it, didn't you? So there's a part of the game where you get otaku as a client option, where you are then put through the body modification process, and you can imagine which fetish the otaku picks. Lollies. You are literally physically altered, well, not you, but Iris is physically altered to resemble a child, so you can say, Oni-chan! And so many parts of me just died right then and there that I can't. Anyways, the second problem I had with how they decided to present the backstory, because goddamn, they knocked you over the head with expositional rants like I beat the shit out of people with my beat stick in Resident Evil 5. It just kind of got to the point where I stopped giving a shit about the game's backstory because it was just so much to process in the span of like 5 minutes while the rest of the story was going on. That is not how you set the stage. And then my third complaint was how the writers chose to deal with the different paths, because there weren't any. There were a total of 18 different options that would affect what kind of ending you would get, which I didn't entirely understand because it's only you picking your clientele. But despite having so many options to pick from, the only thing that really changes is maybe a line here and there, and then of course the end scene that you get. That did kind of kill the replay value for me. I can't review the art as well as I would like because I guess I've just been in such a rut lately that my brain just kind of shut down. But the art is good. There are a lot of little details here and there, like how some surfaces are reflective and the surfaces of Darktown, including the brothel, look gritty and kind of gross. Even the tiles are uneven and a little cracked in Iris's chamber. There's also a spectacular scene created of forestry that Iris was kidnapped from, and I honestly wish we got to see more of that instead of just the gray slums. Because the slums are just kind of like one palette of grays and cool browns, which made things a little boring for me, even though I know that the creators were trying to create a bleak and unpleasant environment. Other than that, I do have to point out how creative they got with the aliens. In the writing portion, I mentioned how they each had their own personalities, and they did touch base a little on the aliens' cultures, but they were also pretty well created when it came to the visuals. There's one that looked a lot like a Nemoidian from Star Wars, and I heard that in the OVA they even had a Rhodian, and I just kind of thought that was funny. Outside of that though, they were pretty original designs, and there were a few of them where you got the oogity boogity on in like a really creative way, and that kept things very interesting. I mean, hell, even some of them had their genitals designed differently so they weren't just like the conical mushroom-shaped thing that we normally see in these games. And this is what happens when I try to force a review. I start talking about the way penises look. Meh. So all in all, I did enjoy Armored Warrior Iris. The story was well thought out. I enjoyed the narrative used. The voice actors did a splendid job at bringing their characters to life. And the art was pretty damn nice, even if I flubbed the entire segment of this review. I did skip over the gameplay segment because I feel like Armored Warrior Iris just didn't warrant one, because it kind of just, it covered the basics of visual novel gameplay, which is primarily centered in the menu. The game did lack an auto feature though, which was a lamentable decision made by the developers. This was a decently long game, and that was a lot of clicking. Also, pro tip, if you do decide to play this, be sure to turn off the background music because the entire soundtrack was just laughably bad. It was a disaster. Anyways, those are my thoughts on Armored Warrior Iris. Have you played it? Which alien was your favorite? Let me know in the comments below. Otherwise, you can find a link to the game as well as my social media in the description. Happy unbirthday, and I will see you later. Bye!